I'd like for you to stay a while and listen, because today we're going to be doing a little bit of a story time. There's been some recent developments around the Wheel of Time franchise where a ghost from the past has re-emerged to once again pull feelings of hostility from fans across the world. But those outside of the know might be left wondering, why? Why do people have such a visceral reaction to the name Red Eagle Entertainment, aka IWoT? Now, I've mentioned some angles to their controversies in the past in various fantasy newses, but today I would like to give you one place where I did my best to do a lot of research to also dispel some myths that are not true about the company and try and give the best recounting to my ability of the long legacy, decades at this point, between Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time and Red Eagle Entertainment, aka IWoT, owned by Larry and Rick. So without any further ado, let us spin a yarn and begin with part. For this to work, I need you to do your best to rewind in your mind 2 decades to the year 2004. We are, of course, fresh in the wake of the Lord of the Rings movies, changing how people possibly view fantasy adaptations forever. And an author, Robert Jordan, the creator of the best-selling Wheel of Time series, is about to make a choice he will regret for the rest of his life. He agrees to sell the adaptation rights to the Wheel of Time to 2 gentlemen sitting across from him, the aforementioned Rick Selvage and Larry Mondragon, for what seems like a shockingly small $35,000, or adjusted for inflation today, just under $60K. Now, it's important to keep in mind, this is 2004. Well, yes, the Lord of the Rings movies were what they were. It's still not the post-Game of Thrones market. Authors are not protecting their IP rights with an iron fist, and many of them are just selling them off trying to make a quick payday. And $60,000 for just about anybody is not an amount of money you turn your nose up at. And there is actually a quote from Robert Jordan at this time saying if he even got an adaptation that was similar to the 1998 Merlin miniseries, he'd be happy with it.
I thought Merlin was all right.
Yeah.
All right. Not Emmy caliber, but all right. If they do, if what I get is what they did in Merlin, I'll be perfectly satisfied.
So how much input?
As long as I don't get what they did in Noah.
Expectations were a little bit different back in 2004. Time, it sure moves. I want to reiterate, Robert Jordan's books are selling. He's a wealthy man. I am no way trying to say that this initial dollar amount was ripping him off. And it seems that he was just trying to throw his hat in the ring to hopefully see his iconic characters brought to the silver screen, and no one can begrudge him for that. And in fact, in the first year of his deal with Red Eagle Entertainment, there is some movement. Amazingly, they are able to get, by July of 2005, a graphic novel of his prequel book, New Spring. And they even took in Robert Jordan's creative input for a lot of the art direction. In fact, if you get the New Spring graphic novel, there's some of the emails from Robert Jordan sent to Red Eagle Entertainment during this time, and they are characteristically exactly what you would expect from Robert Jordan. Just ridiculously detailed notes about how the artist kind of got like buttons versus zippers wrong. It's amazing. So, nice job, Selvage and Mondragon, whose name I really do struggle to believe is real. Was that a birth name, or did you change it because you're such a big fan? There's a character named Lan Mandragoran, and so Larry Mondragon. Is that? I couldn't find the answer to that, but holy crap. Anyway, everything from this era of Red Eagle Entertainment's interaction with Wheel of Time does seem cordial enough. Not too long after this, fans got word that the dynamic was changing.
There's blood in the air.
And eventually, things would get so bad, Red Eagle Entertainment would end up invoking a disparagement clause included in the contract. Join me as we get into the downturn of this relationship, right after a quick word from today's sponsor. This Justin! Campfire has launched their official mobile reading app. That means everything you already love about Campfire is gonna be available right at your little fingertippies. And for those of you like me who want to move away from the Amazon ecosystem, you can do so and read your favorite genre fiction in a whole new way. Available on both iOS, and Android. Just like on the website when you buy a book on Campfire, so much extra content will immediately come available at no extra cost. That's still probably my favorite part of Campfire. No cost to create an account, and there will never be a subscription. So you just pay for what you actually want. And depending on the author, you can also purchase additional content for them that they've created just for Campfire. And what I love about this is it's intelligently made so that the content will become available to you as you reach the part in the story where that content makes sense for you to learn. It's like you're unlocking a compendium that only tells you what's appropriate at any given time in the story, so that when you're reading a big old confusing fantasy book, you don't get that in there confused. Okay, the script says everything imaginable. I think that's an overpromise. Do you have furry?
Yeah.
Jackson? They've got everything imaginable, from romance to fantasy to paranormal to sci-fi to horror, mystery, and so much more, but not furry.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to discover great stories from every genre. So go ahead and check out Campfire in the description down below and give it a shot today. Back to our rather inflammatory video. Now, aside from Red Eagle Entertainment repeatedly stating that they were trying to make a movie, the next few years slipped by without much action happening for the franchise at all. Things were quiet. Rumors of attempts at projects floated about the fan forums, but aside from the graphic novel run that 20 years on is still not past the second book, the momentum around one of the world's best-selling fantasy series stalled out right as the genre was becoming hotter than ever in terms of adaptation. I don't want to make it, you get what I'm saying. And by 2007, fans got their first piece of irrefutable evidence that the rumors of a storm brewing between Robert Jordan and Red Eagle were absolutely true, because the author took to his blog and wrote,
I hear things now and then floating out in the air. For instance, I hear that word was floating about Comic Cons in San Diego that I am displeased with Red Eagle. Too true. Too very true. In a few more months, that last contract they have with anyone on God's green earth that so much as mentions my name will come to an end, and we can see what happens after that. You see, among other things, they forgot an old dictum of LBJ back when he was just a congressman from Texas, when he famously, or infamously, said, "Don't spit in the soup, boys. We all have to eat." Worse, Red Eagle thought they could tell me they spit in the soup, or pee in it, or if they wanted to, there wasn't anything I could do to stop them. You can't apologize your way out of that with me. Not that they tried. There isn't enough money in the world to buy your way out of it with me. Not that they tried that either. So, they get no further help from me. Once they're completely out of the picture, we'll see what happens.
And believe it or not, this is not where the disparagement clause was invoked. We'll get to that once things get litigious. Litigious.
Which is fun to say.
But in terms of what Robert Jordan actually said here, god damn dude, what happened? But unfortunately for us as fans, aside from rumors that have echoed into oblivion, we don't entirely know what exactly caused this pivot. Was it just he was tired of a lack of movement, or was there pissing in soup? Well, that certainly seems to be the implication. Possibly deals that Robert Jordan liked that Red Eagle fumbled. We're not entirely sure, and I don't think we ever will be. But what we do know is that by 2009, Red Eagle Entertainment actually managed an exciting deal with trying to avoid copyright strike from Universal. A deal was made for a 5-figure sum and eventually renewed for a, quote, 7-figure deal. I tried my best to find exact numbers here, but I couldn't. But we do know Red Eagle Entertainment is pulling in cash beyond just the graphic novel sales they worked with Robert Jordan on. This was happening while an attempt at another Wheel of Time video game was tried and failed, which making games of any kind is extremely hard. We can't know whose fault it is with things falling through, but this wasn't their only attempt at trying to launch a video game. And this brings me to my biggest discovery of looking into Red Eagle Entertainment here, because while a legitimate video game was attempted, they then took another route, and I want to encourage you to keep this pattern of behavior in mind, because in 2012, a Kickstarter campaign was launched for a potential Wheel of Time mobile game. Yay! Welcome to Wheel of Cleavage Legends! And it had an ambitious goal of $450,000. $300,000, or about $740,000 if you adjust for inflation. Now, because you've never heard of this game, you probably already assumed, yeah, it didn't meet its goal. It probably didn't come very close. But I would like you to now genuinely go into the comment section and give your best guess for how much money they managed to raise with The Wheel of Time. One of the best-selling fantasy series ever that at this point in its run had sold over 44 million copies. How much money did they raise for a Wheel of Time mobile game? Did they miss the mark by $100,000? $200,000? What if I told you they missed the mark by over $447,000? That is right. They failed to raise over $3,000. They fell short of $3K. How did you manage to fuck up that badly?
Oh, you managed that anyways.
Even a Wheel of Time mobile game should get some money. I want to make this clear. I actually called my publisher Bryce, who works at Wraithmark, and they do Kickstarters, and I asked him, how did this fail so badly? And his response was,
I have no idea.
Like, he could not fail with the Wheel of Time IP on any project enough that it failed to even bring in 5 figures. The immediate thought is like, oh, they just didn't launch the campaign. This was only like pre-backing. No. There are comments from people who did back this once live project. And my favorite part is the top one is someone saying, I only backed this essentially so that I could just say, F you, Red Eagle. The more you look into it, the more this failure does make sense to an extent. I still think it is a spectacular failure that does enter in the I could not fail that hard, it's impressive territory. But all of the promises around the game were extremely vague. The only actual look at any form of tangible product was some text overlaid these wallpapers that vaguely looked Wheel of Time, and while the Kickstarter campaign was launched in August, they were promising a delivery by January, which, for anyone who knows anything, even about mobile development, that's ambitious. The only other marketing it seems to have had were these videos recorded with people involved in the project that, to me, give off the same energy as a hostage situation. So I just think the biggest takeaway here is I'm kind of proud of consumers. People across the land, if they manage to come across this Kickstarter, all together went, no, this seems like a bad product. I'm not backing it. And I just want to say, good job, consumers. I don't often get to say that. That is a really nice thing to be able to say. This is just one failure though, and Rick and Larry are certainly making money off the Wheel of Time at this point, and they are also extending their contracts with Robert Jordan. The $35,000 was not the only payment they ever made to him. There were 2 extensions that were reached with the Jordan estate that totaled about $600,000. And $600,000 is not chump change to anybody. So this seems like it actually could be a fairly fair situation, though a rather embarrassing one with some failed projects for Robert Jordan, until you realize they've spent just over $630,000 to keep the rights for the Wheel of Time for over a decade at this point. We're fast forwarding to mid 2014, and for just $630,000, not adjusted for inflation, Larry and Rick have held on to one of the largest franchises the fantasy genre has ever seen, which I understand. There are probably details, I'm speculating here, but I think it's safe to say in their initial contract with Robert Jordan that they would have a right to extend for a dollar amount to be agreed on, and Robert Jordan may or may not have had the ability to refuse. We can only speculate. I could not find those details online. But someone sitting on rights is by no means unheard of. Though, I want to point out, it seems to be basically all that Red Eagle Entertainment does. It's a company that, for all of this time, sits on Wheel of Time. If you look at their website, and even how they've rebranded recently, this is all they do. But okay, yes, we're cutting to 2014. Let's speed up the memory banks here and now start picturing what's going on in 2014. Oh, Obama's still president and Kayla just moved to Korea, which is an important event I am sure all of us are well aware of. But notably for this story, nothing else substantial aside from the graphic novel has come into existence from this 10-year deal between Robert Jordan and Red Eagle. The value of every major fantasy IP, though, has just had its largest boost ever due to the culturally just monumentous impact of a little-known adaptation called A Game of... And there is even a little reported on close relationship between George R.R. Martin and Robert Jordan. It's nice to remember every now and then that the fantasy space is a kind of small one, and a lot of these authors really do love and respect each other. In fact, there is House of Jordan in A Song of Ice and Fire, which guess who that's a reference to? But something that kind of inevitably ends up feeling frustrating is when you realize a single episode of Game of Thrones often cost around $10 million to produce. These two sitting on the entire adaptation rights for Wheel of Time for less than $1 million over a decade, and seeming to do basically nothing with it. The reference to pissy soup starts making a little more sense. At the time though, even the most not aware of the current rights issues happening around the Wheel of Time fan began to speculate, why is there no momentum for this series to be adapted in any way? Game of Thrones is seasons deep in 2014, and the Wheel of Time seems ripe for the picking up, for a video game even, or hell, try a mobile game again. And I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it is important to keep in mind that you can't entirely put blame on Red Eagle for this. The ball is in Universal's court. They bought into Wheel of Time in 2009, and their rights extended all the way to 2014. It happens very frequently, but it seems they purchased the rights to Wheel of Time just to have the option. And while Red Eagle Entertainment, when they made this deal, was happy to talk about the movie they discussed or a potential mini-series, didn't seem they got anything in the contract that said anything actually had to be done. And so as 2014 arrived, dust had just gathered. And while I said, I don't believe it's entirely Red Eagle Entertainment's fault, Robert Jordan still did sell the rights to them, believing something would get done. And we're at a decade off from that deal, and the only thing we have to show for it is graphic novels. And I would also like to point out, before that deal had even been made, on his own, Robert Jordan had managed to get an adaptation of Wheel of Time made. It's not that there is some shroud around the series that prevents it. In fact, the original PC game, which is so bizarrely a first-person shooter, is pretty dang good. And no, despite some misconceptions you might see, Red Eagle Entertainment had nothing to do with it. It came out before their involvement with the franchise. But in this new Obama year without Kayla in the country, Rick and Larry begin noticing the months ticking by. April, the actual expiration of Universal's purchasing of their rights, is fast approaching. And an important little bit of information, unless a major adaptation is accomplished by February of 2015, Red Eagle Entertainment's rights for the series will also expire. That gives them less than a year to strike a new deal with a major studio and get something in the works, or else Robert Jordan will get his wish and they would no longer be involved with his series. Now, if you find yourself in this position, what do you do? Option A, be happy with the money you've made, understand it's an impossible time frame to get anything of quality created, not want to disrespect the fans, and just let the series rights lapse back to the original author after 10 years of you trying your best and realizing, hey, you just might not be able to handle this. Or option B, scramble! They chose option B.
That was the perfect time to panic.
And this brings us to part 2. Now, we have to bring Sony into the picture here because this actually becomes important to the litigious times just on the horizon. During this tense period between 2014 and 2015, July of 2014 to be exact, Harriet McDougal, Robert Jordan's now widow, rest in peace Robert Jordan, and Red Eagle Entertainment met with Sony to try and strike a new deal. Harriet was flown out by Sony on their dime to take part in these meetings, as I think any reasonable person understands she would be. She is now the guardian of her deceased husband's work. I'm noting that because, again, becomes relevant. Again, nothing came of these meetings. It was just a meeting with Sony, but it becomes important to lawsuits. So Rick and Larry failed to make a deal with Sony, and now, with even less time left to them, had to figure out what to do so that they could continue their ownership of the adaptation rights for Wheel of Time. But the market for Wheel of Time was also better than it had ever been, and with already striking a 5 and then 7-figure deal with Universal, they didn't want to give up the money train. For them, this was only the beginning, and their plans were getting more ambitious. There was no way they could let the Wheel of Time slip through their fingers, but that meant they had to do something, and do it fast. As time ticked by, and February 15th, the end date of their ownership for Wheel of Time approached, they got moving. And for us, the fans, in the wee hours of 2015, as the new year came about and the dark times for America entered the horizon, Wheel of Time fans were shocked to see a pilot episode for their beloved series had been scheduled, and it was set to air February 8th. Oh my God, that's so cool. Did you all just forget about the time that we all got a Wheel of Time TV show back in 2015? It aired on February 8th. You remember, well, maybe you didn't catch it because it premiered on FX, their sub channel. That's okay though, not everyone's able to get HBO, right? Like, yeah, it's a kind of a sub channel for FX, but oh yeah, you also might not have caught it because it aired at 1:30 in the morning Eastern Standard Time, which let's call that not ideal. Oh, and yeah, 1:30 a.m. in the morning Eastern Standard Time for FXX. That's not when they premiere new shows. Shocking, I know. And that's because this was client-supplied programming. You know, like an infomercial. What the fuck?
Hi, Billy Mays here for the world's greatest insult.
That is, yes, put that together in your head. During a time in which a channel tries to make money from allowing people to pay to put on infomercials, we got Winter Dragon, the first ever live action adaptation for the Wheel of Time. Just to emphasize how close this was cutting it, the rights were set to revert back to the Jordan estate on the 11th of February. This pilot aired at 1:30 a.m. on the 8th of February. Of course, it was immediately panned by fans. I can't even really say it was panned by critics because, of course, none of them really even watched it. Why would they? It's clearly just an ash can. Currently, it's sitting at a remarkable for the wrong reasons 2.4 out of 10 on IMDb, and just about any other place where a review does manage to exist of it reflects a similar score. Its biggest sin, though, was just how clearly zero effort was actually put into this. Again, this is well into seasons of Game of Thrones, and the opening exposition dump they included comes across like an early PlayStation 2 cutscene. From start to finish, Winter Dragon didn't even try to hide exactly what it was: an ash can. And now, everybody, let's talk about ash can. Welcome to class. Please take your seats. Your pencils should already be sharpened and erasers ready to erase. Ashcan copies have quite the legacy in Hollywood, but their origins actually can be traced back to the 1930s before they really took off in the 40s, and specifically affecting the comic book industry. A practice came about where comic books that were never actually meant to hit shelves would be written and trademarked. Think of it just like trying to spam a bunch of different URLs, which people do now, so that hopefully down the road, someone will have to buy it from you. The wiki page for Ashcan copies actually has a great example for this and a really well done definition. Wiz Comics actually originally wanted its name to be Thrill Comics, but instead of giving in to the attempt at Ashcan foolery, they just decided to change their name, which I do believe in general tends to be the better practice. Over the years, the creation of Ashcans spread far beyond the comic book industry, but it has remained prevalent specifically in superhero spaces. So what you'd end up seeing, especially in the 70s to 80s, even in the 90s, would be just hapdash thrown together whatever adaptations of comic books. And this is where you get the infamous, never actually released in theaters, Fantastic Four movie. Though notably, this has actually happened repeatedly with Fantastic Four franchise, where a reboot has happened to occur right when rights were getting ready to lapse. They just haven't necessarily been Ashcan quality. And this is very clearly what Winter Dragon was for the Wheel of Time. Late night editing cut in, y'all. I didn't even know that Mental Floss, for their article on Ashcan copies, literally uses the Wheel of Time as an example with Winter Dragon until I was editing, looking for additional sources to back me up. I don't want to say too much, but I think we're making it to the big leagues because we're in Mental Floss, baby. Just something out so that you can technically claim, hey, we met the legal requirements of the contract, we get to keep them. But this sets the stage for our final part, part 3. Just to fully cement how shadily this was put together, in my opinion, let's read a quote released the day after it aired from the current guardian of the Wheel of Time franchise, Harriet McDougal, Robert Jordan's widow.
This morning brought startling news. A pilot for a Wheel of Time series, the pilot, being called Winter Dragon, had appeared at 1:30 in the morning East Coast time on FXX TV, a channel somewhere in the 700s founded to concentrate on comedy, according to the Washington Post. It was made without my knowledge or cooperation. I never saw the script. No one associated with Bandersnatch Group, the successor in interest to James O'Rigney, was aware of this. Bandersnatch has an existing contract with Universal Pictures that grants television rights to them until this Wednesday, February 11th. At which point, these rights revert to Bandersnatch. I see no mention of Universal in the pilot, nor, I repeat, was Bandersnatch or Robert Jordan's estate informed of this in any way. I am dumbfounded by this occurrence and am taking steps to prevent its reoccurrence. Harriet P. McDougal.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Just to highlight their repeat behavior of having something fail and then scrambling to try and get something else in place, they, without informing Harriet, got together this entire production and tried to release it without her knowledge to technically fulfill a contract's obligations. Let's get into that. Before we do though, I'm willing to admit, there's a lot of subjective opinions going on here. Maybe Winter Dragon, not as bad as people say. Maybe this was an actual valiant attempt at Red Eagle Entertainment to creating something. They were truly passionate. Oh no, there's a quote we should look at. Let's look at a quote real quick. When asked about this unorthodox airing by IO9, Rick Selvage had to say, "You probably know that a lot of pilots are put on the air at different times in different ways and for different reasons. A lot of other properties, there's always an air date that you need to do something by, and that was certainly a part of it." Do you see what you just admitted there? Do we hear the thing that he just said out loud of, oh, we had to make this air by a certain date because of contractual concerns? It wasn't a genuine attempt. Sir, you aired an infomercial. It is literally pulling a stunt to retain this IP. The author has made well aware they are not wanting you to continue to have. Legally, I don't know what the answer is there. Morally, ethically, I have my thoughts. In the same interview though, Rick promised that there were vague things with a major adaptation coming in 2015. That didn't happen. And in the same interview, Rick, in my opinion, displayed a truly stunning ignorance on the actual series of the Wheel of Time, because he said he didn't believe Winter Dragon would cause any trouble for future adaptations because neither characters that appeared in Winter Dragon appear later on in the series. I'm sorry for the implied spoiler about Shamael being in this, but Rick, what the f are you talking about? He is the main overarching antagonist for the entire series, aside from the Dark One. You know that guy in season 1 of Wheel of Time who was there a lot? Same character. What? To be fair, there is a correction that was apparently submitted during this interview to be like, I didn't actually mean what I said about the two characters that I talked about, and that blatantly false statement, it just comes across like he went home and was like, maybe I should read these. Oh, fuck. And I also want to point out, Luz Theron, in some ways, also returns. So it's like, definitely not a correct thing to say, and then like, technically not a correct thing to say for both characters. Whatever. We need to focus because this is where things get litigious and messy. After this debacle, as everyone could probably predict, this relationship went even further south and lawyers got involved. A lawsuit was launched with Red Eagle Entertainment suing Harriet McDougal. I want to say that again, not Harriet suing them for this clear ashcan bullshit, but them suing her for, it's time for it, breaking the disparagement clause of the contract.
There's only one guy who would have the balls, the nerve, the audacity to do that.
And on a personal opinion note, Harriet didn't really disparage the actual content very much, just the situation around that. Again, fully willing to admit, in terms of a disparagement clause, I don't know how that works. But, doesn't seem as bad as pissy soup. But you're a smart cookie, and you probably noticed that Harriet said she thought Universal was still going to be doing something when she met with Sony just a few months prior. Well, Red Eagle Entertainment's lawsuit did claim her willingness to travel across country and personally attend this meeting encouraged the plaintiff to continue its efforts to make a deal with Sony, a major competitor for Universal. She was also aware that plaintiff had until February 11th, 2015 to broadcast a television program in the United States to prevent a rights reversion to her and defendant Bandersnatch. I will say, I don't know why Harriet McDougal, I can't reach out to her, we are not in communication, would have claimed that, because we do know for sure she did attend this meeting with Sony. But that lack of clarity then seems to be what Red Eagle Entertainment tries to latch their lawsuit onto. And then that therefore somehow makes their ashcan okay. Their lawsuit continued saying, Harriet McDougal disparagingly referred to the pilot in quotation marks and cast doubt upon plaintiff's rights to produce the pilot by unequivocally denying knowledge of those rights while asserting that Universal still possess rights to produce the program. I have a lot of problems with this, but please keep in mind, I am no legal expert. I am sure someone claiming to be a legal expert will leave a comment, but we'll see. My opinions here are, though, this seems like trying to hold on to a brittle branch. I don't know how Harriet could have met with Sony, tried to do this deal, and then been under the impression that Universal was still in charge of the rights, but I don't see the relevance to that, to then quote disparaging Winter Dragon. In fact, Harriet McDougal's statement to me more just seemed confusing. And yes, they are upset about quotation marks, but I'm also not willing to say from a purely legal perspective that Red Eagle Entertainment had nothing to stand on here. And I think that's why the direction of this lawsuit kind of went a frustrating way. But the final bit of oomph for the stakes of the lawsuit here we're again able to see due to an interview that Rick gave with IO9, where we see that they were seeking damages from Harriet McDougal and Bandersnatch. They added claims of slander and intentional interference with contractual relations. Rick told IO9 it was, quote, pretty well laid out in the lawsuit. Fans went kind of wild at this. As you can imagine, with a rather popular franchise that hasn't had any huge news for it, seeing this sudden spike of, for lack of a better term here on the internet, drama meant there was tons of speculation, and I actually want to dispel an important one here. It's one that I fell for and believed for a long time, despite really it coming down to just a misattributed date in a Wired article. For the details here, it came out that the shooting schedule for the entire production was conceived of, put together, and shot, all within 2 months, with a single day or weekend, depending on what source you look at, of filming. Yeah, that certainly seems like some mega crunch. But even more controversy stirred when the director of Winter Dragon, James Howell, aka James Sada, passed soon after airing. And I gotta get into this because it's a big part of the narrative and I want to dispel just misinformation. One article claimed that the director passed the day after shooting finished, and people put together that with this crunched schedule, crash was a result of his exhaustion. This is not true. Production wrapped, and we know this for sure from tweets from James himself, on February 4th, and the episode aired on the 8th. James passed away, unfortunately, on the 9th. I do not want to say that this production did not experience some form of crunch, and of course that's a terrible practice. But the misrepresentation of dates paint a picture that I do not believe is true. There could have been parties going on to celebrate it airing or something along those lines. This is a tweet from James days before his accident, where he's literally even kind of implying that was an insane, probably not great schedule for shooting, but he then got his rest, and the crash has not directly related to that from what we can tell with any proof online. Rest in peace to him, but back to the actual lawsuit. As I said, frustratingly, we actually didn't get too much here, aside from a clearly lawyered up statement that said, "The following is a press statement that has been approved by the studio involved in contract negotiations. Update, wanted to share with you exciting news about The Wheel of Time. Legal issues have been resolved. The Wheel of Time will be a cutting-edge TV series. I couldn't be more pleased. Look for the official announcement coming soon from a major studio." Of course, this wasn't exactly what fans were looking for. There is a big difference between what those who absolutely love this story wanted to see happen and what was legally required. I went into this video expecting to just have slam dunk after slam dunk on Red Eagle across the board, and while I think their business practices are hilariously incompetent to the point where they actually were able to impress with how much they were able to fail to raise, and ethically, I certainly think what they pulled off with this ashcan copy is awful. But in terms of legality, well, ethics don't dictate the law. All right, though. So a major studio has become involved. That's great, right? Fans can rejoice. No one more evil could possibly be stepping in. From here, Amazon partnering with Sony came in, and the history of the first major Wheel of Time adaptation was written. We got a show that I won't get too much into because I have done endless ranting about it here on my channel, but let's say it has been a source of controversies of its own. It's definitely not as bad as some people will make it out to be, and it's not perfect. Go watch my reviews. Rather repugnantly, in my opinion, Red Eagle Entertainment was able to keep their name attached to this show because that's right, they still are a part of this legally. But I think they were aware at this point that they had tarnished their reputation among fans of Robert Jordan and the Wheel of Time itself enough that they needed a rebranding. And that's actually part of the reason why I decided to make this video. IWoT is Red Eagle Entertainment. If you're gonna forget everything else in this video, please just remember IWoT is Red Eagle Entertainment under another name for branding. And since the show has aired, IWoT has been hard at work. They've promised many additional exciting Wheel of Time projects coming down the road with the rights that they have retained in their deal with Sony and Amazon. I wonder how much they got paid for that deal with Sony and Amazon. But these promises included prequel movies, as well as a potential anime for the Wheel of Time. I wonder if we'll see a pattern of a project mishandled and then attempted again happen again.
That's when we realize it's a pattern.
It's possible. You could maybe. But what I think is more likely to happen than a repeat of that behavior is nothing. Prove me wrong. If anyone, Rick or Larry from Red Eagle Entertainment, sorry, IWoT is watching. Either way, it's a win-win for me. Either I get to point at another failed attempt and go, look, I was right. Not the correct guardians for the adaptation rights for Wheel of Time. Or I get more Wheel of Time content to talk about here on the channel. It's a win-win. I can't wait to see what you do next. The wheel is in your court, my friend. Now, the reason I'm quite sure, frankly, that we're not actually going to see a trilogy of prequel movies or an anime show its face is, in my opinion, we're fully in just opinion based on the facts we've talked about territory. IWoT has shown itself to be quite lazy when it comes to trying to get something adapted. Getting an adaptation done is a titanic task. No matter what the medium, whether you're employing a live action crew, a talented team of animated artists, or programmers for a video game, committing to something from beginning to end and putting in the years of effort on the business side and artistic side is not something that Red Eagle Entertainment has managed to pull off even once. Their graphic novels didn't finish the series. Please remember that. And I still don't know why Robert Jordan, all the way back in the day, referred to them as soup pissers. But what we do know is where their, quote, creative, unquote, energies are being put today. And while we've already seen they do not care about doing justice to Robert Jordan's works with only putting out high effort premium content, they've pretty much with their chest now said they don't care about artistic integrity in general. Because Rick and Larry, like so many buffoons of the modern era, have decided that creativity is just too hard. And so, why not let AI do what it does with what rights they retain for the Wheel of Time? And just recently on Fantasy News, the reason I wanted to talk about all this in the first place. After that, we had IWoT dropping their trailer for their one-powered AI Wheel of Time tool. And I'm not going to show a single frame of it here because I do not trust this group to not be the kind to pull some shenanigans, but all you really need to know about it in terms of its reception and the quality of the work going on behind the scenes, in my opinion, allegedly other words to cover my butt, is they do not have comments turned on. But funnily enough, they didn't do that by just turning off comments. They uploaded it under YouTube Kids. I have absolutely no idea why they did that. You can just turn off a comment section, but okay. And you can just assume exactly what this is. A bunch of AI generated art with a whole bunch of more claims about what this is gonna be able to do. It's gobbledygook in my opinion.
Nothing for you.
But there was an interview dropped as well, and the comments section on that I would call suspiciously clean. So I think we can safely just go back to ignoring this. I'm actually also gonna say, please don't go watch this trailer. Don't go give them attention. Any more attention we give this, it's like giving it power. So I think we should just let it float off and die. So now you know why that story made me feel the way that it did. Are the fans overreacting? Honestly, after my research and finding out the full context for all of this the best I could with surprising amount of misinformation out there, I definitely still don't love Red Eagle and IWoT. I do not love them. I think they have done a very bad job. There are unanswered questions in the air that I would love to get answers to and share with you here. But in terms of the future of adaptation for the Wheel of Time, I'm not feeling good. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Like and subscribe if you have not already, and hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. Have a good one, y'all. Peace.